Kill Bill. Now on to the double feature of Grindhouse, including Death Proof.
Yep. So Grindhouse double feature is Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof and Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror, which we're not gonna discuss as much, if at all. But yeah, so you have not seen this one, or you saw it once and it didn't make much of an impression?
I saw it and it was a movie.
Yeah.
I did watch Planet Terror maybe a year ago and really enjoyed that. It was just a late night movie that I watched by myself, and I think Anna was on a trip somewhere, so I watched it because I knew she wouldn't like it, and yeah, I liked it. It was fun.
It's definitely a great double feature.
Right.
But yeah, I agree with you. Planet Terror is like a schlock masterpiece.
Yes, exactly.
Just guts and gore and tits and a gun as a leg and all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, these are sexploitative movies, so it's all about just like showing like lewd things happening and almost getting they're not, it's not pornography, but it's enough where it's just huge tracts of land or just like almost upskirt shots, just Tarantino really getting sexploitative. Like as we talked about with the blaxploitation, he is utilizing, I think you said it best, where he's utilizing the genre, he's deconstructing it and then constructing his own thing, in a way. So yeah, the sexploitation is all of the things that I just mentioned, while also being violent as well.
That's part of it.
And he puts his own spin on that. The plot of Death Proof, though, is pretty funny.
Yeah, I guess it should be stated that when I say exploitation, it mostly just means basically trying to make money by intentionally being over the top. For Tarantino, that's the use of the N-word, that's the use of extreme violence, it's the use of treating women more like objects than characters. And I think this is as good a place to talk about his long-term friendship and working relationship with Harvey Weinstein as any, because this is a movie that kind of is weirdly meta about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it takes on the structure of a slasher movie without being a slasher movie. Kurt Russell plays a villain who murders women, but not like a way a slasher would. He murders them with his death-proofed car. So the whole point is he has this car that is specifically rigged that if he crashes it, he won't die. And so what he does is he goes to bars and like gets women drunk and then follows them home and crashes their cars and murders them.
You mean like he crashes his car into them?
Yeah, he runs them off the road, blows up their cars. But yeah, there's just some like odd cognitive dissonance between like Kurt Russell's character, stuntman Mike, doing this and preying on young women, specifically with the fact that in the movie he's like a Hollywood stuntman. And so the fact that like what makes this and even Planet Terror strange or maybe even debatable to watch now is the fact that Rose McGowan is in both movies, and Rose McGowan is one of the people that Weinstein assaulted, or worse, over the years. So Harvey Weinstein, for whatever people that don't know, Harvey Weinstein is a legendary movie producer who was the definition of the like favors for fame model. So he represented a lot of old school Hollywood ideas, both in terms of filmmaking, which led to some really high quality movies, but also led to debauchery and sexual harassment, rape, power dynamics imbalance, just a lot of shady shit. Um, but the fact that he definitely pressured Rose McGowan, and that is probably why she got this role, is deeply disturbing, especially for the fact that her body is exploited both in this movie and in Planet Terror. And so it's very difficult to watch these and have them completely know what they're doing and poke fun at the idea that they're exploiting women when they literally were just exploiting her. And so it's really hard to somehow separate the art from the artist in this case, or even more so to separate Quentin Tarantino from Harvey Weinstein, and not say that Tarantino, for whatever he's claimed over the years, with how much of Weinstein's behavior he was aware of or tried to stop, or assisted in, it's difficult with this movie in particular to not just be like he fucking knew, and this feels pretty either indifferent about it or just saying who cares because we're gonna make fun movies. Um,
Well, the irony gets darker because if you read into the actual just plot of the film, it's a man who is killing women
yes,
with his car
an
because he has,
aging
yes,
Hollywood man.
yes, young girls killing them with his car.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take a lot for you to read into the symbolism there of the old man stealing the young women's bodies and lives. So yeah, read
Mhm.
into that as you will. And Tarantino made the movie, which, as I've said, continually highlights the women as being objects, not characters.
Yeah. Even though then the women end up being victorious and outsmart and outmaneuver the guy and kill him at the end.
Yes.
Um, and that's always been Tarantino's biggest defensive point of saying like, how dare you say I'm anti-woman? Because I made a 4-hour samurai epic with Uma Thurman as the star. How dare you say that? I made Jackie Brown. I revitalized Pam Grier's career by making her into an intelligent, complex, and compelling hero. Um, but at the same time that he's done these things, his films also all contain extreme violence towards women or objectification of women. Reservoir
Yes.
Dogs just doesn't even have women. There's no women characters. There's like women in some scenes, but all they do is scream and run away. Um, Pulp Fiction features, Mia being the one in control of the relationship. So Uma Thurman's character is basically the one that is, um, you know, dictating terms to John Travolta's character. But then she overdoses on heroin, which is horrifying. And then, they have to stab her in the chest with the huge needle to get her. So it's just explicit violence towards women. Yeah, there's tons of violence done to Uma Thurman in Kill Bill, some of which ended up just being real violence. She was permanently hurt from a car accident.
Yes.
Another strange thing to have made Death Proof when you literally made a movie that hurt Uma Thurman permanently in a car accident. The other, even stranger part is that the eventual protagonist of Death Proof is Zoe Bell, who was the real life stunt woman for Uma Thurman.
Oh,
So there's a lot of
Jesus.
layers here where it basically just seems like Tarantino knew exactly what he was doing, and it's hard not to find fault or blame in him. Um, Both for hurting Thurman, for being somewhat complicit in Weinstein's activities. Um, it's very difficult to separate him from that, and I think that that will forever be a tarnishing point on his reputation, even well after he's gone, and whatever of his movies are still remembered or watched. I think that this will always, the Harvey Weinstein things mixed with the content of his films will always be a shadow, um, looming about what Tarantino's real beliefs or intents were, because no matter how much he thinks violence is fun, the violence towards women is often still shown that way to be vengeful. And it makes me think of like revenge porn or just vengeance towards women in general, because Tarantino is kind of like a movie nerd, and so maybe he didn't always have success with women before he was a celebrity. Since
So
then, he's had numerous high-profile girlfriends who are also celebrities. But um, yeah, what?
yeah, I was just gonna say, so that's almost his way of unconsciously expressing it or consciously expressing like, hey, I gotcha. I'm gonna put this on the screen. Yeah, I mean, artists do that all the time, whether they know it or not. But I think Tarantino, the image to me that came up as you were saying, like tarnished, and also like that this is like it's like he's walking like seven tight ropes at one time, and some of them in my mind he fell off from. I'm just surprised that like I mean I'm sure there's a group out there that has tried to cancel him or is canceling him or what have you, but we'll see. Like you said, 50 years, how these age.
Well, I think
Um,
his next movie is going to be the most self-referential, um, and probably
Masturbatory.
it'll definitely be masturbatory, but I think it'll be the most aggressive against his own audience. I think it is going to be like,
Oh yeah, I mean it is called the film critic.
yeah. So I think he's going to take aim at the entire industry that he profiteered from while making it worse culturally. Um,
Yeah,
Despite his contributions to the larger romantic notion of the cinema.
yeah. So leading down this a similar or that motif of violence towards women is Inglorious Bastards, which has a bunch of violence towards Nazis, which everyone cheers, yay, kill the Nazis. Like they literally just slaughter a bunch of Nazis in the movie, which he makes you complicit with, and kind of similar to Pulp Fiction, where they're killing a racist rapist. Like he makes you cheer for an entire theater full of Nazis burning, right?
But yes, but this moves a step further. This is a far more mature film, despite the fact
Yeah,
that it's crazy than Pulp Fiction for what precedes that.
right. But I know I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but the thing that I wanted to get to was the scene where Diane Kruger is being choked out, and Tarantino insisted that he be the one whose hands choked her out in the scene. So there's just there's some strange things happening with him in regards to women.
Seems like
Um,
maybe he hates women and likes to see them get hurt.
yeah, yeah, exactly. How dare you say something so bold? Yeah,
So controversial yet so brave.
yeah, so controversial yet so brave. So yeah, Inglorious Bastards came out in 2009. It stars Brad Pitt, Diane Kruger, another director, Eli Roth, as well,
Eli
who
Roth's
plays.
also in Death Proof, but yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and he plays the bear Jew, and oh man, for some reason I can't. Christoph Waltz. There we go.
hmm
Christoph Waltz. Yeah, some pretty iconic performances. This movie and Pulp Fiction, I would say, are the ones that he's most known for. Um, they're my favorite out of his two. Um,
Oh, same, undoubtedly.
one of the best openings to a movie is this. You could show this to students in high school, the opening of the movie, and just, yeah, you don't really need to, like, you could do a film analysis basically of just tension, of dialogue, of color, shot choices, pretty much everything that involves filmmaking.
Subtext.
Subtext, exactly.
Yeah, tension specifically. Boy, this is, I couldn't agree more. This is one of the best openings to a movie ever. Like, Christoph Waltz won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for this, and it's never been more well deserved. Um, yeah, geez, yeah, he steals every scene he's in, but that first scene when he comes in and he's so lackadaisical about what he's doing. And uh, it's an interesting way to write Nazis. I've seen plenty of movies try it different ways, and usually the one I appreciate the most is showing Nazis as being rather banal. Because fascism in a lot of ways is like we romanticize it in terms of like Hitler being a larger than life man, like a maniac who genocided numerous groups and ascended to power very quickly, had a big military, gave crazy speeches where he's shouting, on fucking meth all the time, like just on drugs, had weird sex pervert stuff. So people think of fascism as being this like, wow, you know a fascist when you see one because they're just like a wild person. But in general, I prefer when it's more of a subdued, they're a very boring person and they're just going about it routinely because, they want the power. And I think Christoph Waltz rides the line between those two things perfectly. And the first scene shows that it just exemplifies that idea really well because he starts out just talking about milk and then he starts to get the anti-Semitism in there, and then it eventually, like, he goes from being very jovial with the man to just extremely serious, and the camera starts to move in very slowly and you get the man is sweating, and you can see in this French actor's face, like you can see he knows what's coming. Like he breaks, and you can see that Waltz is, getting something out of it in the same perverse way that Tarantino seems to get off on violence. Christoph Waltz's character in this is exactly the same. He gets off on his power and the violence he can do to the Jewish people he's rounding up.
The switch of languages also. Oh, do you mind if I speak French or German? I forget which one he speaks in. Actually, he switches to English. I believe is the one that the people who are hiding don't understand.
Exactly, which he knows. Yeah.
Which, as a director, is a genius maneuver for the audience to experience. Yeah, that dramatic irony is just, oof, builds the tension expertly.
Yeah, overall, so other than that flowery just glorification of the opening scene, I do think this is Tarantino's best movie. I don't know if I like it or Pulp Fiction more. I find them both to be very enjoyable movies, but this one takes itself and the audience to task. It doesn't let the heroes get away with their rampant violence. It doesn't let anyone get away with it. And it forces you to humanize with a Nazi sniper, because you see his pain of trying to. Because the seminal moment, the whole point of the movie is a bunch of crazy American Jewish soldiers are fighting a guerrilla war through Germany to get to Hitler and kill him. And while that's happening, a girl who survives the first scene of the movie, a French girl,
Shoshana!
Yeah, she moves to Paris and opens up a theater. And then the whole point of the movie is Hitler and a bunch of high-ranking Nazi officials are going to that cinema to watch a propaganda film about a Nazi sniper. So the Americans go there with the plan to kill Hitler, and so does this other lady. And the climax of the movie is while you're seeing this glorification of Nazi violence, you're about to get the glorification of violence against Nazis. And so the film just directly is telling the viewer, how dare you participate in this rampant violence? How dare you get enjoyment from this?
Yes.
Like, this is sickening. This should sicken you. You should not be cheering.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see that, and it's horrible for this Nazi character played by Daniel Bruhl. He does a great job.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, apologies to Daniel Bruhl, Melanie Laurent, as well as Michael Fassbender, casually also in here.
Yeah, yeah.
Melanie Laurent is great as Shoshana.
Yes, yeah.
She is great.
But that's another. It's just another like perfection moment for Tarantino to do that and to say, like, basically just showing the audience, like, I'm sick of you enjoying this violence so much. And then it immediately is just BJ Novak and Eli Roth gunning down Nazis, and they blow up Hitler, and then they carve up Christoph Waltz later. And it's fun. That's because it's fun, Jan. Like, immediately, Tarantino's like, how dare we do this? Look how much fun it is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's art. Like it's something that you're consuming, you're partaking with, and you're thinking about it, but you're also probably enjoying it, or you're horrified by it, or a mix of both. And that's Tarantino for you, with multiple layers of it. Um, I've said this before about movies like this. I think it might just be the like almost too real clarity of some of the movies that came out at like around this time from like the late aughts into like 20 probably 15. But it kind of just like throws me for a loop for some reason. That and like the mix of color. I think that might honestly be one of the reasons why. Like I think it works super well in the opening shot. Like it's really really great there. Um, but I prefer Pulp Fiction to this. I still like really appreciate this movie. Yeah, I guess I also can't really I'm trying to think why it kind of throws me for a loop. It might be because some of the scenes feel a bit like a shtick, if you will. Like upon like rewatch. Like I still enjoy the scene where like Eli Roth as the Bear Jew comes out, um, which is cool. But then there are like some other scenes that are like just a bit like I don't know, like it's an interesting concept, but the way it's executed just kind of is. It's fine. I'm like I get what he's going for. It's probably just subjective. Like I just don't really like it as much.
Yeah, I love all that shit. I mean, I like every scene in this movie. Um, the first couple of times I saw it, I actually had the same problems. I thought there was stuff that was needlessly operatic. Um, Sort of like it was stretching its idea of being cinematic in big and small moments too far, and I think, like at least for me, the last couple of times I viewed it, I've liked the whole thing.
Yeah, it may be that like goofiness kind of throws me off some, but that's like the point of the movie. So like that
It's a bingo.
everything with Hans Landa or Landa, yeah, is like that shit I enjoy. I like the Gorlami as well. But yeah,
Margarete
Brad
Gorlami.
Brad
One
Pitt
more time,
is
please.
Brad Pitt
Gorlami.
is good in the movie, but I mean there's the picture of him right now and he's got the I don't know. I don't know. It just kind of like is somewhat jarring like to the message that it's going for. But it may just be that it's so complicated that I just need to watch it again until it like clicks.
I think what you're highlighting is just still Tarantino's excesses, which could always be
Yes.
edited down. But I
Yes.
think this movie, even way more so than Pulp Fiction, highlights him finally ascending to the peak of his craft, with scenes like the opening scene, with scenes like the Killing Hitler scene, propaganda film scene, and most especially the bar scene. Because
Oh
that
God,
bar
yeah.
scene is like 15 minutes of dialogue,
It's really good.
wonderfully rendered, perfectly edited. Like, in terms of editing something down with a dialogue that is just so well regimented in terms of pacing, God, it is top shelf stuff. Like it's just that ability to turn tone and feeling so quickly. Um, is a like for a writer director is usually when they've peaked in their craft. And I don't think that's a high he's gotten back to since. I don't know that he necessarily wants to, but um, there's just something about that. Like once the each of those moments, you know what's coming, and the anticipation of what's coming is just drawn out exactly. Notices it and just immediately is like, and you know because there's just a slight camera move. It's a very subtle thing. It's just a small camera pushes in a little bit, and you immediately know.
Yeah, those of you that aren't watching the video, I just held up 3 fingers in the way that it's done in the film that tips off the Germans that
Michael Fassbender's faking.
they're not as they seem. Yeah, like those 3 scenes that you mentioned though, the opening, the basement bar scene, as well as Hitler getting his just desserts. The stuff that's in between, it's fine for me. I don't know. It doesn't hold up in my estimation to what's done in Pulp Fiction. That's the way that I kind of see it. Like all of the stuff. Yeah, it may be a pacing issue that I have a problem with. I'm not sure. It just feels like all the other stuff is like a bit like filler, and it's there, and it like does kind of punch you a little bit, and like there are jokes interspersed, and there's like fun and like funniness and stuff, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe some of it I just felt like it would do a little bit more.
I would watch it again because I think all those scenes have a lot of subtlety to them and subtext where, like, basically Londa knows from the opening scene, he knows A, that what he's doing is wrong, B, he doesn't believe any of that shit about Jews being rats, and C, Hitler is going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
He knows all this, and that's why he allows Hitler to die before even making a deal. Like, he basically is allowed to orchestrate the whole thing. And so he is, despite the fact that he's not the one pushing the plot along, in reality he kind of is, inadvertently, by letting Shoshana escape at the beginning.
Right.
And then clearly recognizing her when he's eating the strudel in a very underappreciated scene. And basically,
you think he definitely does?
Yes, 100%. Based on what he says, he recognizes her. It's the same exact face that the guy, the Nazi officer in the bar makes when he sees the 3. Londa makes the same exact face, and it is not a coincidence. The details are all, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I to compare the 2 movies, I would say that like Pulp Fiction is a masterwork, like high watermark for like the post modern filmmaking American genre. Like just as a movement, it's like a really good example of blending genres together and knowing exactly how to play with them. Whereas this one is just like a wild exploitative war movie that's done at such a high scale and at a really high skill level. It's still not even like that. Like, it's a blockbuster. It was like a $70 million budget.
People love this movie, and I also really like it, to be clear. I'm more so just being like overly critical of a movie just to try to like piece out why I feel a certain way about some scenes, because I've thought about it before but haven't quite nailed down why I feel that way about it. Yeah,
I
is.
just would recommend watching it again, but yeah, for a preference thing,
it's always worth revisiting in my experience. Speaking of movies that are fun to revisit, here comes Django Unchained in 2012. I believe you and I watched this on Christmas Day Eve. So the night, Christmas Day at night. Yeah. And it was a blast. Yeah. It was a blast. You've got Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, Leonardo DiCaprio, Samuel L. Jackson. Is Don Juan in the movie as well? Is that who the
Don
the
Johnson?
One guy? Don Johnson. Yeah, Don Johnson is in it.
Michael Parks again. Michael Parks was in Death Proof. He's like the cop in Death Proof.
The music, and Jonah Hill makes an appearance. The music in this movie absolutely slaps.
Oh, and the original Django, Franco Nero's in this.
Right, Franco Nero.
Very briefly, just to say Django.
Yeah. So, yeah, this movie came out in 2012. It also is one of the reasons why Tarantino has gotten away with saying the N-word, maybe, or also brings up like what tightrope is this man walking? Like what exactly are his feelings on race? Yeah, so basically Django Unchained chronicles Django, who was a slave and then basically meets out punishment with Christoph Waltz's character, Dr. King Schultz, who is a bounty hunter and a dentist, right?
Mm-hmm. He couldn't make enough money as a dentist, so he became a bounty hunter. You poor devils.
For all you dentists out there who aren't quite cutting the jib, maybe instead of trying to cut your teeth at dentistry, you should just remove some people's teeth. Yeah, I apologize for all those horrible puns, but anyway, yeah, this movie is pretty enjoyable. I guess you could say it runs a bit long. The pacing of it at times doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Like upon rewatch, it definitely doesn't quite work at times. But
well, it feels like it was meant to be way longer.
yes, like it feels more like it should have been an epic. You mean?
Yeah, it is epic, but like them doing like the training montage in the snowy mountains is just cut short, and then there's like some text that comes over the screen, and it's like, oh, that was probably meant to be another 30-minute, like another whole subplot where they go and hunt somebody down in the snow, as just like a homage to other spaghetti westerns like The Great Silence.
Right.
But I just think there wasn't any room in this already, pretty long movie. It's like 2 hours and a half, 2 hours 40. Yeah, we could talk about the structure of how it kind of plays out, because there's the like sort of buddy cop element to it, where Schultz and Django, Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz, like their chemistry is really good, despite the fact that Jamie Foxx is playing, a completely uneducated slave. And so his performance ends up being very brutish. And it's not until, halfway through the movie that he starts to ascend to his role of playing not only a slaver, but a bounty hunter, where he starts to get more of a flair for the dramatic, and sort of come into his own as a character that is not just, a man whose humanity is removed.
Right. Right.
But yeah, this movie once again has another, just actually two horrifically brutal scenes of violence. Several more. I mean, people are whipped and mutilated repeatedly. There's the Mendingo fighting scene where
Yes.
two men brutally fight with their hands to the death, and then one has to kill the other with a hammer. A man is torn to shreds by dogs. Hundreds of people are shot, both in the head and the chest. Blood is everywhere. The N-word is used prolifically, just everywhere in this movie. And yeah, so this was controversial. I mean, this one, even more so than any of his other ones, really rubbed people the wrong way, and it's not hard to see why. There's another Tarantino self-insert where he's in the movie as an Australian man just chumming along, saying the N-word again.
Apparently, Will Smith was actually considered for Django, and he and Quentin, they disagreed creatively on the direction that Django would take. And yeah, so that was the reason why he wasn't Django and Jamie Foxx was Django. I think Will Smith wanted Django to have like more like emphasis on his like family and like the creation of his like family unit. Whereas Tarantino was like, nah, we don't need that shit.
I already wrote the script. Shut up.
Yep. He was like, you're the actor. I don't know why you're trying to give me advice. Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, this script does, I think, have some problems to it structurally. Like that's what I was kind of getting to, is there's not a good handoff between the buddy cop part and then the Django rescuing his wife, both for vengeance and for love.
I see.
And so I think each part of the story actually works, but it's those two parts that don't work well together. And so they're basically like, one is handed off. Like it basically just goes from he's with Schultz and Schultz is ride or die with him until they rescue his wife. But then once Schultz dies, it's kind of like, oh, well, you took out the most charismatic part of the movie, who also expresses all the most interesting themes in the movie. Like this man who kills people for a living is suddenly sickened by the violence he sees and finally comes to understand that his role in the bounty hunting trade is not much different than being a slaver, and that he can no longer stomach this life and the brutality of owning slaves, pitting them against each other in fights, or worse yet, the man being torn apart by dogs, which results in him, dying. And all of that is brilliant, but it makes the end feel like a footnote because ultimately it doesn't feel like Django's journey. It feels like Schultz's journey.
Yep.
And so for the end to be like, oh, there's this guy who doesn't really have much of a personality now, and his only goal is save my woman, and then he just does that with no problem. Like the only
Hindrance.
conflict, the only hindrance he has is that he gets like, Walton Goggins is gonna castrate him, and then instead they're like, nah, we gotta sell him with his balls on. They want him good and balled up or whatever. There's a funny Tarantino line about it, but like basically as soon as they sell him off, it just feels like lazy writing.
Yeah.
Because then Tarantino is in the movie and he just shoots Tarantino and blows him up, kills the other Australians. Then
It's a bit of a blitz to the end.
Yeah, then it's just him shooting and killing everybody. Just, hey, you're Django, I'm the bad man.
Yeah, it literally just becomes a montage of just killing with no sort of like preface, or there's zero tension happening. It's literally just, oh, bam, 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 bam.
Which was good earlier in the movie with the Rick Ross song where they're just. But then it feels
100 black like coffins.
You already exactly.
God damn.
Black coffins. Yeah. So yeah, the end of the movie, for that reason, I think feels a little hollow, especially given what Inglourious Bastards does. Like for Tarantino sort of commenting on his own role in pushing extreme violence in filmmaking. And this movie wants to get there with Schultz's character, but the fact that they need to kill him to complete his transformation and his realization of what he's become, kind of stalls it out. But that being said, King Schultz is an amazing character. Jamie Foxx is quite good in the movie. Leonardo DiCaprio is excellent as this despicable character. Samuel L. Jackson puts on a great performance as Stephen Warren.
He's so good in that role, and his hair and makeup further like it further emphasizes like his character.
But this is a good time to bring up, like, part of the debate around Tarantino's use of the N-word is that many other celebrities and public figures have commented either in defense of Tarantino being allowed to write whatever he wants or say whatever he wants, versus the ones that are like, you are causing racism to expand. You should not say that word, and your movies are setting back race relations. Um, Spike Lee in particular had some pretty nasty things to say about this movie and being like, yeah, this is so over the top. This is not cinema. This is disgusting. You should be stopped. And Samuel Jackson, who of course this would have been now his third collaboration with him, and he has one more we get to talk about. Um, Samuel Jackson has always defended Tarantino and been like, listen, he's not racist. His movies are not racist. Um, One of the things he said was like Leonardo DiCaprio was having trouble saying the N word, and like a specifically calling Sam Jackson did that. Like that's there's a funny Roy Williams Jr. bit about it. How like Leonardo DiCaprio had to just like hide from black people for a few years after making the movie. Um, but so Sam Jackson just tells him like just call me it. It's another Tuesday for me. Like what we're doing here is like acting. Like I'm not going to be incensed by this, and already like this movie isn't making things worse in my eyes. So that's his defense. Right. On top of that, he's always defended Tarantino by saying Quentin has cast me in multiple times as the lead role, where I am the smartest character and the most proficient character in my skill. And I see everything that's going on here, and I think inherently that means that he's not racist. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Tarantino's movies are a bit racist. This one in particular, I'm not sure that it is, because I think this one is championing black rights and it's championing black power more than it's,
tearing down.
Look how fun it is to say the N-word.
Right.
Even though it's designed comedically that some of the uses of it are for laughs. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's questionable, especially in Pulp Fiction with the dead friend storage. Like, that's really funny, but that's where the debate lies. Is laughing at that mean that I'm racist? Does it mean that Tarantino's racist for also thinking it's funny? Should we be able to laugh at it? Should we laugh at it to take power away from the hate of the word? How do we do that when Tarantino uses the word so well to express hate because he's a competent filmmaker? Yeah. And so I don't know. I would rather that he does it and there's these controversial movies. I think the worst thing we can do is just either dismiss it entirely and say we can never do that again, or on the other side say it's just fun. Leave me alone and let me say it, because those are both, I think, to me, clearly wrong. Sorry, I'm going on a rant here. I don't mean to.
No, you addressed something that I was going to bring up as well, which is like we're not here to say whether or not Tarantino is racist or not. We obviously don't know him. But like it's not really for us to say. We're more so trying to just give you information about what people who know him have said, as well as our own interpretations of the movies, and just telling you like about the movies. We're trying to give you like a full scope of his films, as well as I guess who he is, what he has said, and artistically who he is. That's always been our goal on the podcast, but also just through discussions. So yeah. You were talking about Samuel L. Leading into the Hateful Eight. Unless you had more to say about Django.
No, I think that mostly wraps that up. I mean, I will say Waltz just destroys these two roles. He's so good in this and Inglourious Bastards.
The one last thing I will say is that the violence that happens in Django Unchained, like this is a continuing motif, right? Where like the baddies get just killed. The baddies get their just desserts. It's just a typical revenge movie, right? And instead of Nazis this time, instead of racist rapists, right? It's slave owners and people who are perpetrating that. And the violence in this movie, like I find myself cheering for more than in some of the other movies, or at least not questioning it as much because they're slave owners. And Yeah, moving into the, I just wanted to make that point, just that continuing motif keeps popping up. The Hateful Eight comes next. This one starring Samuel L. Jackson, Kurt Russell, Jennifer Jason Leigh. Is Tim Roth in this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim Roth is in this one. Michael Madsen as well. Trying to think who else. I've only seen this. Channing Tatum. Oh my God,
Yeah,
that's right.
Bruce Dern, Zoe Bell again.
Yeah.
Walton Goggins.
Yeah, Zoe Bell, actually. I really like her in this movie. I think
And she's not in it for long either, but
right. And Jennifer Jason Leigh absolutely murders her role.
Yeah, so there wasn't really a whole lot of it in either Inglourious Bastards or Django Unchained. Like there were not really actors being like put back up that were not famous before. But Jennifer Jason Leigh was kind of at a weird point in her career, and this helped revitalize it. She's been in quite a number of bigger movies after this, but
I've only seen this one once. I definitely need to revisit it. It is a bit long for my liking, but that is part of its. I think part of what it's going for is its length. We talked a little about it off air, but yeah.
Yeah. So just genre-wise, not counting the sort of thing like locked room aspect of Paranoia. It's kind of a revenge western. It's very easy to group this in with Django for that reason. And I think they both have similar flaws where obviously somewhere along the way no one was there to edit Tarantino's ideas.
Or stand up to his ideas to be able to have that like rapport with him to be like, hey, Quentin, are we sure about this?
Yeah, I mean it's a common thing that happens, and I'm partially happy that's why Tarantino has decided he'll only make one more movie, because in some way he must be recognizing that like everyone around him is a yes man, and he has no way to get legitimate criticism, and he doesn't want to take criticism. Obviously, this next movie, the movie critic, he doesn't want to take criticism from critics because he views them as a bunch of who the hell knows what, but
vultures,
right?
Vultures who can't catch their prey themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one I think goes even further to some of Tarantino's excesses, but the way they're done in Django is through cartoonish violence done in a big way. So blowing up the whole plantation, shooting 40 guys in a row, more longer drawn out scenes of excessive violence, whereas this one there is plenty of violence in it, but the excesses are more so long monologue based dialogue scenes. This whole movie is like 3 hours of dialogue. He's still able to keep tension together, but the movie's segmented into chapters which break up the flow very strangely. And so it's hard to determine what kind of movie this wants to be in a weird way. It feels like the least well categorized in terms of the way Tarantino seems to approach crafting a movie. Just in terms, like, it's not quite revenge. It doesn't really fulfill itself as a western, and it's not really like the locked room horror movie either because of the weird flashback parts. So it's very long, way too much dialogue, like way too much stuff that doesn't all need to be there. And yeah, sort of poorly structured. There's also the Tarantino monologue that he just had to insert himself in, um, which is awful. Like, it's just Domergue's got a secret, and it's like, oh God, why'd you put yourself in the movie? You were doing so well, Quentin.
Yeah,
You hadn't inserted yourself, but
Major Marquise Warren, Daisy Domergue, Chris Mannix, Joe Gage, Sanford Smithers. The names alone, yeah, are just really,
Marquise.
really funny. Um, yeah, I now that I think about it more, it almost reminds me of like one of those short stories that was like serialized in newspapers that would just like come out every week that you would read. And it almost makes me think that it's like three different stories. Like like it has a lot of dialogue, like you said. It's partially Western, so like I'm just picturing you read it and you're like, oh, this is like a cool Western. And then like part of it is just like that locked room bottle episode where you're reading that and you're like, oh shit, like what's going on between these people? Like who's doing it? Who's gonna come out on top? What have you? Um, yeah, it kind of reminds me of that, and I don't know if it would be better served as a TV show, like if it would have been better as a show or what have you, or like you said, if he really just needed someone to cut down on what was happening, or at least edit it in a more intelligible manner or better way. Um,
Well,
yeah,
so the promise of the premise is that it's going to be the Hateful Eight. 8 people are locked in a cabin, and someone is not who they appear to be. It takes them an hour to get to the cabin.
yeah.
Before that, all it is various people arguing about whether or not they can ride in a stagecoach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then lots of hitting a woman in the face and saying the N word.
Huh.
Tarantino's two favorite things.
Huh.
Um,
It's almost like he's done that before.
yeah, this one's got a lot of violence towards Jennifer Jason Leigh. Just a lot of
Yes.
punching her in the face. And I mean, the movie just ends with them hanging her in a moment that is just purely played off as both heroic and the right thing to do.
It's honorable.
Yes,
An
they were honoring
honorable
John
hanging.
Ruth by, yeah. Um, this would be Tarantino's final collaboration with Weinstein, who got in trouble shortly after its release.
2015. You done
Oh no,
goofed.
I guess it was a
This
couple years
is
later,
yeah, this is after. This is after that.
but it was his final collaboration with him, which just felt, like the perfect time to mention right after that the whole movie is a woman being punched in the face.
Hmm.
Um, so all this criticism aside, I actually really enjoy this movie because because the dialogue is excellent. Samuel Jackson is just as charismatic and scene stealing as always. His delivery of everything is perfect, and again, he's the smartest character. He manipulates everyone. He's able to outwit them, outmaneuver them, and outshoot them.
His hair
Um,
and makeup is expert, and his eyes in this are so gleeful and just he's cheesing just like you motherfuckers.
put my big black warm Johnson in his throat.
Is that a line from it?
Yeah, that is to me the best part of the movie because he once he like sees everyone in the cabin because he comes in and is kind of quiet and he can see that something went wrong. Like his friends who owned the haberdashery clearly are killed and he doesn't know who in here did it. So he decides to pick on the old racist man first. So he baits him out with this long-winded story knowing he can get him to try to pick up the gun and shoot him. And so he presumably makes up the tale of what he did to his son, where his son, like many others, came up to try to kill Jackson in his home before Jackson gets the drop on him, strips him down, walks him for miles in the freezing snow before forcing him to give him a blowjob and then killing him.
Hmm.
Which, well, again, into the, sexual violence stuff that Tarantino loves. it is a hilarious scene. And yeah,
Wee-oo.
but just excellently acted. Just the darkness that Jackson pulls through that is also just sickeningly funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like it kind of describes all the best parts of this movie. Sickeningly funny, just shocking violence that's quick, not as usually sustained. Um, yeah. What? So, since you've only seen it once, like, what? How do you
No,
find that it?
that definitely encapsulates it very well. Like if people don't like the movie or don't find themselves enjoying it, it's probably because on the whole they aren't the biggest fan of Tarantino. And when it's also presented in a way that is very sort of long-winded and then is legitimate punching of women in the face, it's punchy dialogue, and you're just kind of like really thrown off. And the movie is kind of just like, dude, have you seen my track record? This is what the movie was gonna be the whole time. Like, are you kidding me?
Mm,
Like that's like this movie, it's not a capstone to everything he's done before, but like look at this movie and look at Django. Hmm. The main character is a very very smart liberating black man. Oh, he's a bounty hunter? Huh. Wow. It's almost like he combined the two characters from the last movie and then he made it into like a bottle thing. Yeah, I'm not saying that he's like a poor writer. I'm more so saying like if someone doesn't like
yeah.
this movie or you paid to watch it in theaters, like what did you think you were gonna watch? Like so like I also appreciate that it does stick to um what Tarantino typically does, what he's always been known for. Um I do remember like laughing at a number of scenes because of how sickeningly funny it is and ironic, and it is really quick. It's real quick on the draw for how long it is. Um, yeah, I think this would actually be like a perfect snow day movie or like a perfect like cabin in the woods uh movie to watch. Yeah.
Oddly enough, I've rewatched this movie many times because um I don't know that I articulated it well, but it's basically the rhythm of the dialogue may be Tarantino's best, like sustained dialogue rhythm. So even though they're these
Mm.
long, kind of unrelated monologues, there's a pacing to it that is just like I study it endlessly. Like the content of the monologues may be where there's issues and the relevancy to the actual story being told, but the
Uh
craft of his ability to write this with many different characters who are constantly getting folded in and the interchanges that occur through it is masterwork. So I have always watched this as like I watch it in the morning. Like I like watching this with some coffee. Um, I,
its beats are really strong, like both narrative wise but also dialogue. Like the dialogue beats are just like perfect, you're saying.
yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
But just
Interesting.
the flow of it, not yeah, partially the beats. Like if the beats are like the emotional highs and lows, those depend on the content and those depend on the story, which I think is the thinner aspect of the movie. Um,
Hmm.
it's like it's a distinction between the difference between the craft of the screenplay and the execution in that direction versus the story, where I think the story here is rather weak, but the screenplay is incredible and the direction works really well to amplify the screenplay, but the direction hurts the story.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Also, Ennio Morricone, great music.
Oh yeah.
Some leftover scores from the thing that he threw in. Just yeah, just looking back at my the thing poster back there, making sure Morricone's name was on it. It's there. Don't worry, it's there. Also, the cinematography in this thing is wonderful. This whole thing was shot on 35 millimeter. Um, and even some of the scenes that don't matter, like there's a scene when they get to the haberdashery where Jackson's in the barn with Mexican Bob, and there's just like snow falling through the rafters. Like that's just one example of many where it's like, that just there's no you can't get frames like that because you can't open the lens of a digital camera to get the exposure right that you can
Yep.
get on 35 millimeter. And it's just like cinematic perfection in the detail that is then comical that the rest of the movie is, UN word and
Right. Um. Yeah. Let's finish this off. Last one. So, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out in 2019. Wow, I can't believe that's 4 years, going on 4 years ago now. This one has a ludicrous cast as far as like the three primary actors and actresses: Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie. All obviously extremely well-known icons. Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt like playing alongside and across from each other, and then Margot Robbie at the height of her fame is in a Tarantino film with these two all-star actors is really, really wild. And then with Tarantino, um, as you have mentioned, this goes along with his ideas or movies rather of being historical, right? Because Margot Robbie plays Sharon Tate. For those of you that don't know, the story of Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate was pregnant and brutally murdered um, while living in Hollywood by a member of the Manson family.
yeah, a detachment of the Manson family.
Yeah, yeah, that's a better way of putting it. So he, much like he does in Inglourious Bastards, where he rewrites the history um, in his own way, he does a similar thing with this story.
Yeah, everything from Bastards through this one has that element of historical revisionism.
Mm-hmm.
Because the spoiler is Sharon Tate is not killed at the end of this. Instead, our protagonist comes in and mercilessly murders these Manson women. In another fun scene of Tarantino brutalizes women.
Yep.
Just can't stop.
Yeah, but who doesn't want to see Brad Pitt killing people with beers?
It's a wonderful scene, but there's a
But
pattern
yeah,
of behavior here.
yeah, yeah. That being said, like knowing what actually happened in history and then watching this movie, um, it did actually like really hit me emotionally. I saw it in theaters, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it yeah, I don't know if it was just me thinking about what actually happened to Sharon Tate, and thinking about that, but there's a concept in tragedies, um, explaining that like when you are witnessing a tragedy, like a play, or reading a tragedy, your feelings go through catharsis, right? Your emotions go through catharsis, and I think about that. Catharsis loosely translates to the purging of emotion. I like to think of it more as like the transformation of emotion. Yes, you are like purging that, but the emotion is still there. It's not like you've gotten rid of it completely from yourself, but you're turning that feeling that you have, like that sick feeling from knowing that a pregnant woman was murdered in a really strange and horrific way, seemingly by chance. Um, and you're watching, as you've said, like the revision of that. It's transforming those emotions in a certain way. I don't know if it helps with accepting what happened, I'm not sure, but it's certainly artful, I would say, in this movie. I know we like basically just ruined the entire movie, but
Oh, whatever. This isn't like a. It's one of those ones where I think if you didn't know about Polanski and Tate anyway,
yeah,
um,
you should going into it.
well, not necessarily you should, but you won't get much out of the ending because you'll be like, okay, so
Yeah.
why build that up? What's the significance? Where it's like obviously the whole intent of it is that in Tarantino's mind there could have been this beautiful world where Rick Dalton didn't disappear as a celebrity because his friend saved Sharon Tate, and he grew on, he went on to work with Roman Polanski, and Roman Polanski's life didn't go off the rails, and the golden age of Hollywood never died, because that's ultimately is what this is about, is rewriting the death of the golden age of Hollywood, which Sharon Tate's murder in some strange ways facilitated. I mean, there were other factors involved, just like there were other factors involved in Roman Polanski's life taking a dark turn. Um, but yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this one. This is a much different movie, much different
Yes.
Tarantino movie than any of his other ones. It's far more artful in a not necessarily a period piece way, but it flows more in the world. There's more attention to world building done. And so part of the production design and the art design is around making things feel like the 60s. Um, and I mention this because the sort of production design and art design of the previous three movies is very hyper stylized. Like Nazi Germany and Nazi occupied Paris are hyper stylized. The plantations that Django visits with Schultz are hyper stylized. The cabin is still run down, but it feels like a theater set as opposed to like a detailed movie set you live in. Whereas this one makes you feel more of characters living in this area. Um, Brad Pitt lives in a trailer with his dog, and that sort of highlights like his life going downhill versus where Leonardo DiCaprio lives, which is in a mansion, I believe, like in the Hollywood Hills. Um, yeah, everything good.
Yeah, it's just a vacuum happening, which I
Oh,
can't think when that's happening.
mm. Uh, so yeah, that I really like that aspect of it, like a world building. Um, then there's also I think this movie in a lot of ways is about Tarantino's relationship with Weinstein. Um, I think to include to have it be about Polanski and Sharon Tate, um, like to it would have been so easy for him to just reenact the Tate murder in some sort of bizarre, funny Tarantino way, and then make a statement about the murder of her relating to the violence he's shown towards women through the rest of his films, and then how relating Polanski somehow to Harvey Weinstein, but instead it goes in a very different direction, um, where obviously the Tate survives and whatever implication that leaves for Polanski surviving. Um, I don't know what do you think of this sort of already very meta movie having some kind of comment about Weinstein?
I think that's probably true. I never really thought about it that way. Um, yeah, I could see that being true. Um, yeah, I think I can only watch this movie one more time. Like I don't think
Mm.
that I will ever. I mean, who's to say? Like 25 years from now, who knows? Maybe I'll want to rewatch it. But if I do watch it again, I think it will be the last time. Not because it's a bad movie, just because it doesn't do a whole lot for me, like after watching it one time. Like his other movies, like obviously like you know what's gonna happen, right? Because you've seen it before, but this one is just like great. It could be pacing, it could be the story itself. I don't know. It may also just be that it won't live up to the first time that I saw it in theaters. So, like I liked it when I saw it in theaters. I didn't think it was like the best movie ever. It's just like, yeah, that was a Tarantino movie. It's 2019. He came out with a movie. He has all of these like really popular stars in it. Al Pacino's in it casually. Yeah, like.
Oh, I think this movie is like brilliant.
I think it's a cool
just
movie.
Short of Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Bastards. I think it's really subtle. I think there are a lot of layers to it. Like it's not just commenting on, sort of this age of Hollywood ending. And I don't think it's like, to kind of just as a brief theory about like what it might say about his relationship with Harvey Weinstein is I think he views himself sort of as Rick Dalton, and he views Cliff Booth as Weinstein, where they had a great working relationship, and the rumors of Booth having murdered his wife is like Tarantino being like, those are just rumors about Harvey raping people.
Right.
And so Tarantino, who clearly doesn't live in the real world, he's been a Hollywood elite millionaire man for 25 years plus. Like he doesn't live a normal life anymore. And in making movies, he lives in fantasy worlds. So the fantasy world he's created with this movie is one in which it ends with Booth being the hero, and it turns out Weinstein didn't rape all those people, and the two of them can continue to be friends, versus now where it's just like the rest of his life is going to be, well, why didn't you do something?
Yep.
That's just one part of it. I think this is another one where the story I don't think matters. Like I don't think the generalized story of this movie matters, and it's more about feelings and the changes of feelings scene to scene, and the way in which it deeply affects Rick Dalton, and the way in which it doesn't affect Booth at all. And it compares these two characters, one of which who wants to be a cowboy and pretends to be a cowboy in the movies and on TV, versus Rick Booth, who is a cowboy in reality. And so you have that great juxtaposition of Rick Booth struggling to play the villain on the TV show.
Cliff Booth. You keep saying Rick Booth. Cliff Booth. Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio plays a cowboy on TV. And meanwhile, Brad Pitt has gone off to the Span Ranch where the Manson family lives and just has a surreal encounter with them, and he's forced to come to cowboy levels of violence to make sure he gets out alive.
Flower Child. He encounters
a
girl named Flower Child. Not, I wouldn't say a woman yet, because she still looks pretty young, but Cliff.
Yeah. And the feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the feet yet, but
no, we failed to acknowledge that yet. Oh yeah, I mean, I can definitely see all of that. I will probably consider that the next time that I see it. I definitely agree with that. I think that's probably what I feel is missing in a lot of ways from Inglourious Bastards, to be honest with you. Is that like emotion? Like the way that the emotion is altered and changed scene to scene. I feel like that would be really interesting to layer on top of everything that's happening in Inglourious Bastards. Like that would make it even better in my estimation. Which is obviously very easy to say, right? And extremely difficult, if not impossible to do. Yeah.
So much of the emotional appeal of Inglourious Bastards is your reaction to, or the evocation of feeling from, like revelatory violence. And then also how you respond to Londa, the Nazi character, where you're both disgusted because he's a Nazi, but intrigued because he's a charming man and he's giving such a charming performance. And he knows all this about fucking strudel or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of whimsy, but this movie is more like fantasy. Like that whole long
Yes.
sequence where you follow Margot Robbie around and she just watches a movie. Like it's so unneeded. It's completely superfluous, but it's fun and like you're meant to get the same feeling of joy she gets from watching a movie. I don't think that scene in particular is done necessarily well in showing that. Mostly just felt like an excuse to get Margot's feet on the screen, but um I just
Uh-huh.
think at this point in his career, for him to do such a bit where he's like, all right, I want to get the hottest hot actress, like both in terms of she's in all the movies and the most attractive. I want to get her. I want to put her fucking feet right on the fucking screen. Let's get those feet. And everyone's like, okay, Quentin, we'll do whatever you want. What?
Literally Barbie exposing her feet. Barbie's OnlyFans. That this movie could be retitled Barbie's OF.
Yeah.
I'm obviously joking. It's just for that one bit. But yeah, it's I'll have to approach it with that in mind next time.
It's interesting. It feels a lot more like a French movie or an Italian
Yes.
movie where it's very close to being like a hangout type movie, but also just an exploration of a space and a time done with smaller flourishes of Tarantinoisms. Be that feat, strange scenes of tension followed by spurts of violence, um, and then I guess the historic revisionism stuff. But
You're definitely making me reconsider my statement about watching it watching it only once more, which is always good.
I mean, I don't. It's funny I say that. I don't know if I'll watch it again soon, but um, I guess it'll depend on what the movie critic is like.
Right.
Like let's imagine the movie critic just opens with Quentin Tarantino sitting in an armchair, and he has a coffee mug that says "bad motherfucker" on it, and he just opens up with he just says the N word, and then he's like, "All right, listen here, N words," and then he just goes on a expletive fueled tirade about how he is racist and hates women,
And then
and
he
then
rapes and punches a woman.
yeah, that I wasn't gonna go that far, but yeah, that. And then the rest of the movie's like a children's movie.
Yeah, that would be as transgressive as Tarantino would do, or he would do what he's done in a lot of his movies where he puts that in at the end. That's the climax of the movie. Yeah. Uh
So what do you think the feet mean
in this movie or in
in all of his movies? What is the significance of the feet? Do you think
well,
he just likes jerking off to his own movies, or do you think there's something else? Is there anything deeper?
well, you see, the feet are the things that we stand on. So the feet represent the foundation of his creativity and how he like gets foundational creativity from women, a la him touching himself to women. So yeah, just circling back there to no, I don't think that the feet necessarily represent anything that much deeper. They totally could to Quentin, but that message seems to be lost um, in the noise of his movies to the point where it's just women tittering their feet up and down and the camera zooms in or it slows down or what have you. So, yeah, that I don't really know. Unclear to me.
I don't know. I've never like I've thought about it. Like just what do the feet mean? What could possibly be a deeper layer for the feet? I've never come up with anything.
I haven't been able to.
I actually just think that Quentin Tarantino gets off on the power of telling people not to wear shoes in his movies,
Yes,
which is
it seems like he is like live action live actioning his kinks is like his directorial style, and he's so artful in the way that he orchestrates his movies that he's able to just shoehorn them in and be like, oh yeah, let's put that shit in there too, because I personally need it as Quentin. I don't know, who knows.
But yeah, that's Quentin Tarantino's career abridged. Um, Clearly a complicated guy, a very technically crafted director, um, a generationally talented writer for a very specific type of dialogue. Uh, just excellent at working within genre, excellent at tone.
I think it's also worth mentioning here as we wrap this up his take on becoming a director and going to or not going to film school. Not to knock going to film school. I'm definitely not knocking it as someone who hasn't gone to film school, though. Nearing 30 years old, I don't think that's on the horizon for me as far as time goes or anything. With that being said, I do want to be a director, and in wanting to be a director, I can't think of anything better to do with my time than going out and shooting film and trying to cobble it together with and also while writing and also while exposing myself to other movies, right? Consuming like as many different movies as I possibly can and analyzing them from a technical aspect, and then further incorporating techniques as well as like certain elements within your own artistic eye. So you've told me many times before, but I forget his takeaway as far as like going out and becoming a director.
I didn't go to film school. I went to the films.
There you go.
I think that's more or less been his whole take. I'm sure he's had longer explanations for it, but no, he was definitely always of the mind that it was not worth doing, because why learn that when you can learn for yourself how it's done? Mm-hmm. In terms of why his success happened, it was predominantly luck, but he also lived in LA and ingratiated himself with famous people, giving scripts to anyone who would read them and telling his story ideas to anyone who would listen. So he was in the right place at the right time, sold the right scripts to the right people, and then like basically Reservoir Dogs was just like a luck thing. Like he handed it to the right person who gave it to Harvey Keitel, who was like, what the fuck? What the fuck? This kid's a genius.
Yeah.
Let's make a movie, Quentin. And that was that. Basically, like Reservoir Dogs was such a hit at film festivals that it guaranteed he would get some money to make another. And that collaboration with Weinstein was integral to his success and rise to fame. Because, like, Weinstein was, for a good 20 years, like, the guy. Mm-hmm. Like, if you wanted to win awards, if you wanted to get movies made, he was the guy.
Yeah.
Like, he was funding movies. He made sure they got good distribution. He made sure that you could win awards for them. And the whole time, he was just hurting people.
I was going to say, and if you were an up-and-coming actress, then he made sure that you had to give him something in order for you to get a role.
And he would blacklist you if you said no.
Yeah. So there was always that threat there.
Which he did. Yeah, it's worth, obviously, if, that content is too much for you, I wouldn't read more into it. But there's a great podcast series on a show called Behind the Bastards on Harvey Weinstein that details a lot of these like really crafty behind the scenes abuses of power Weinstein went through, where he was constantly working with private investigators to stop people from leaking the story. Like, this was a man who knew how to keep the power that he had attained. In a really really pretty dark way. But yeah, that'll be the most complicated thing for Tarantino, is that the intermingling of the violence in his content related to the real life violence surrounding his longest collaborator is inextricably tied.
Yeah. Yeah. If there are like lessons, or if there is a lesson to be learned from Tarantino, like what to take away, I appreciate his irreverence, like of his art that he makes. Like clearly he is painstaking with what he creates, both from a writing as well as like a directorial standpoint. I don't know if he's a perfectionist, but I would assume he is, just based on interviews, based on the movies that he's come up with, right? It's not like this shit just like jumps out. Like it's not all created at one time or come up with at one time or executed in one take. Um, so yeah, I admire that like precision. I admire the artistic detail. I admire that he clearly pours himself into the movies and tries to make something that is not just a rip off of something else, but is true to who he is. Whether that's good or bad, or whether or not you do or don't like it, it is Quentin Tarantino. Like that's his stuff. That's his style. That this is his art, and he puts it out there and creates it. And I also, as we've mentioned before, appreciate the fact that he's calling it quits after 10 movies. Obviously, I'm sure Nolan also agrees with me, but like we'd love to have another 20 movies from Tarantino, right? But yeah, just acknowledging that he's gonna call it quits after 10 is fascinating and kind of cool as well. I don't know if you have any other takeaways, but also going with the irreverent part as well. Obviously, Tarantino has a bit of an ego, you could say. So on the flip side of all of that irreverence, you do have to have the humility, I think, to surround yourself with people that aren't just going to be yes men, and to have someone who can actually help you and be critical. And that's way easier said than done. I'm not going to pretend like it isn't, but yeah, I think that's just really important from a directorial standpoint.
Yeah, a couple of things. The one thing is that all of his films, his films up to Inglourious Bastards were all edited by the same person. They were all edited by Sally Menke, a genius editor who in many ways is actually credited with saving Pulp Fiction, which apparently after shooting was a disaster, and Tarantino and Avery's disagreements over how to portray the story was saved by Menke.
Jeez.
And evidently, like, I think it's pretty clear that Menke's eye for getting what Tarantino wanted was integral in his success up through Inglourious Bastards. And I think without her, she may have. I think she died. I actually think that's like she died after Inglourious Bastards, and that's why. Yep, she did. So that's why she was no longer editing his films. I think that played a big part in one of the last voices telling him what to do.
Interesting.
Yeah. Outside of that, what was something else you said about his irreverence? I think his irreverence and general sort of fuck it lackadaisical attitude bleeds over into his real life, and that might have been part of the reason why, he didn't make a better effort to stop Weinstein or stop working with him.
Yeah.
Like, not only was it like, if I continue hitching to this horse, even though I've watched this horse rape a bunch of women, I'll still get money and be able to make my movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's still unclear how much he knew or whatever, or like what he could have done outside of all that. But I do think that his general attitude definitely didn't help, and that would have allowed him to be more indifferent towards atrocities.
Yeah.
There was one other thing based off of what you said, but
I don't know. I talked about his irreverence. I talked about his perfectionism, his painstaking attention to detail, as well as like artfulness and staying true to himself.
yes, yeah. I mean, I agree with all of that. What I was gonna say is relative to or related to the um only doing 10 movies thing. And how he in interviews always relates it to like a fighter only has a certain amount of time, and he'll say like
yes.
directors are only good for 10 years, or people are only X this, that. And it comes back to that monologue that begins the Gold Watch part of Pulp Fiction, where Marcellus Wallace is telling um, Bruce Willis about throwing the fight, and he's like, "You're gonna want to not throw the fight. You're gonna want to actually, win it. That's pride fucking with you." And that's a thing that I think Tarantino really did believe for a long time. He still may, but it's so clear that he let pride fuck with him.
Yeah.
Like, you don't make those Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight for sure without pride getting in your way somewhere. And I don't know. I wouldn't say that he lost the plot, because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is like not a tone deaf movie in a lot of ways. Um, I think it's very good that he decided not to, you know, make another highly controversial, transgressive film about race relations. Um, but I think somewhere in making those two, I think he talked to enough other people in his sort of isolated Hollywood sphere who were like, no, 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 it's right for you to do this. Someone should do it. Anyone can do it, but you ought to, and you need to be fully committed to get your vision across or say whatever it is that is relevant to say about race relations or slavery or what have you.
Yeah, and that's a great note to end on, is that the topics that he is tackling and putting into his movies are some of the most difficult to even remotely navigate on screen. And you're going to naturally piss people off by having the characters he has, or by even just coming up with the ideas that he has. Um, Especially nowadays, especially in 2023, and looking back on these. So I think he is a very defining director, um, in a lot of ways, for just like, yeah, I mean, I hate to retread ground, but the violence aspects, the tension as well, and um, not just exploitation, but you said it perfectly, the deconstruction of his genre and then reconstructing that in his own sort of manner, and building it into something that is greater than what the genre may have accomplished before, or what someone may have considered the genre could be capable of doing.
Yeah, that, I think that's a great place to end it.
That about does her.
So yeah, that's Quentin Tarantino,
Have a good one, everyone.
absolute madman.